welcome into Foxborough Rush. If you're enjoying this, you will love Boston has entered the chat, available on Nesson as well. This week, Ante Campbell and I caught up with our guy, Lou Merloni. We got the skinny on the Baseball Hall of Fame and the Red Sox offseason thus far, of course. Remember, Boston has entered the chat can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and wherever else podcasts are found. Here we go, baby. Foxborough Rush. What a rush. And now I'm going to be on my worst behavior because George is out. Keegs is in. Keagan Stiefel joining us here, and you know he's family to the program. What's up, Keegs?
Hey, parents are gone. We're going to have some fun today.
Kegger.
George can't tell us about all of his fancy plans that he's got for the Patriots. Off the rip today. I'm coming in blind. I'm excited.
I can't wait. Bro, I went to bed early for this just so I was fired up. I mean, I've been drinking Mountain Dews all day. I'm ready to rock and roll with you, Keegs. Let's start with Josh McDaniels.
Let's do it.
I mean, I have not talked to you since all this went down.
Yeah.
Let me just get your initial reaction. We all knew, right? It was like Captain Obvious. It was going to be Josh McDaniels. We were hearing other names. We talked about other names last time I saw you.
Right.
But it seemed like all of us landed on Josh McDaniels. I have to imagine, Keegs, you were not shocked by the news.
Definitely wasn't shocked. I think this is kind of an overarching theme with the Patriots the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Where I'll say I'm not relatively surprised by anything that they've done, but I'm still kind of disappointed, not in the results, but in the process. I think their process with all of this has been, and putting it nicely, it's been not great, but I think it's kind of been a sham, and it really is like shameful that they've approached it the way they have, because with the head coaching interview, they checked off the boxes they needed to check off when it comes to the Rooney Rule, and they made their hire. With offensive coordinator, they checked off those boxes, and then they made the original guy that they were going to hire, they hired him. So not overly excited about that aspect of it, but when it comes to whether or not these guys can get the job done, Mike Vrabel, Josh McDaniels, and then Terrell Williams, who we'll talk about later, I think they did a good job of putting together a staff. Didn't like the process, but I'm okay with the results.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it felt very, I don't know, plain Jane of a move, vanilla sort of move. And by the way, in a shock to no one, of course, former players who had played for McDaniels love the move.
Some of them.
It was some of them.
Right.
Good point.
Depends on where they played.
It depends on where they played. Former Patriot wideout Chris Hogan, of course, loved it. Quote, here's Josh McDaniels in a broad stroke. He's one of the best offensive-minded coaches I've ever been around in my entire career. The way he game plans, the way that he coaches the game, his level of expectation, this is what this team generally needs. As we look at the tweet here, I mean, that doesn't shock you at all, Keegs. Of course Chris Hogan loved the dude, right?
Right. I mean, Chris Hogan won a couple Super Bowls playing for him, so of course he'd like the guy.
Of course he did.
You know, I think the big thing, I do think we should get into the player aspect of this because, like I said, guys who played for him in New England loved him.
Right.
And I think that's because they knew him as an offensive coordinator. They knew him as a mind who could, put them in a position to succeed. Guys who played for him when he was the head coach, when he was the CEO type, celebrated when he got fired. They were jacked up because they didn't have to listen to this guy anymore. And I think there's a big difference between Josh McDaniels, who knows his role as an offensive coordinator, and Josh McDaniels, who's trying to be something that he's not fit to be, which is the head coach. So if we're talking offensive coordinator, I get it, man. He has put together some tremendous offenses. He's put guys in positions to succeed that probably wouldn't have been successful anywhere else. Chris Hogan, the Chris Hogans of the world. Danny Amendola had the best years of his career in New England playing for Josh McDaniels. Guys like that. So I get that they're really excited about him coming in and working with these younger players and all that. But in the back of my mind, I think, how's he going to work under a different head coach? It's not Bill Belichick. It's not a guy who you literally can't try to step up, get one up on. It's just impossible. How's he going to do it with Mike Vrabel? And I believe that Mike Vrabel has enough belief in himself that he's okay with, I'll bring in a guy who's had some, alpha issues in the past, and I'll be able to deal with that on my own time. I trust Mike Vrabel is a bigger dog than Josh McDaniels is.
That's where I'm thinking.
There's a little thing there. There's something there where players might like it from a New England standpoint, but guys who haven't played for him and who haven't won with him, how are they going to feel about playing for him? There's a question.
I want to go back on the Vrabel versus McDaniels thing for a second because I agree with you. Vrabel's a much bigger dog, and I think more of an alpha.
Literally and figuratively.
I really don't think there's going to be any issues.
Yeah.
The only way I see it, Keegs, is if this defense is stellar.
Right.
And Drake Maye's regressing or the offense is sort of sputtering a bit, especially early in the season out of the gate. Let's say we're a month in, and it's pretty clear. Okay, the strength of this team, it's almost old school. Strength of this team's defense. Drake Maye's not taking that step that we thought. The offense looks anemic. Then I think maybe there could be something there where McDaniels could feel defensive, but I really don't see that. In fact, one of the reasons I like the hire, Keegs, was because Josh McDaniels, unlike some of these other candidates we saw, Josh McDaniels is not going to get a head coaching nod or even a look anytime soon.
Don't have to worry about it.
So I'm thinking he really can develop a Drake Maye and work together with a Drake Maye for the next 3, 4, 5 years, bro. So I think that will also help sort of quell any type of any type of alpha issues between those two, because he knows damn well the best route for me to get back to a head coach in this league or elsewhere is to make sure my offense is humming, to make sure Drake Maye can ball out. Is that fair, Keegs?
Absolutely. Do it again with another quarterback. Like he's shown in the past he can do.
Right.
And here's how I look at these things, because they hire Josh McDaniels. And if you're in New England, if you've been around here for a long time, you know that there's a really great way this can go and there's a really bad way this can go. Sure. And I think a lot of people focus on the bad. They focus on he's got a terrible track record as a head coach.
Right.
Players recently, the most recent players to play for him did not enjoy the experience. Younger players have struggled in New England without him here, so why is there going to be a difference when he's here now? I get all of that. But when I look at Josh McDaniels, the first thing I think of is how much success he has working with quarterbacks. And I understand the argument that Tom Brady is Tom Brady, and of course, who wouldn't have success with that guy? I get it. But think about the other guys. Matt Castle, who, after a torn ACL in the first game against Kansas City, got thrust into the starting role after not starting a game since high school, won 10 games, and almost took this team to the playoffs. Mm-hmm. That's a guy that Josh McDaniels worked with. Mm-hmm. You know, Cam Newton, Mac Jones, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jacoby Brissett, all these guys had the most success they had in New England working with him. Yeah. And all of them took that dip down once they stopped working with him directly. You know, let's just go through the order. Jimmy Garoppolo, he moves on to San Francisco, has some early success, but it goes downhill from there. He's just not the guy that they needed in that system. We get it. Jacoby Brissett has had success everywhere, but the best game he ever played in his life was one when they ran the ball 49 times, and he was running all over the place as a rookie playing against Houston. They won 29-0. That's the best game he's ever played. It's been all downhill since then. Cam Newton, 2020. Trav, do you remember how many points the Patriots averaged through 3 games in 2020?
I remember Cam Newton early looked good. He was running, he was throwing, and then did he hurt his shoulder or something? And then it went to hell in a handbasket. Right.
They averaged 29 points and 450 yards a game in 3 weeks. Cam Newton gets COVID. Yeah. The installation process takes a hit. That team goes to crap. It's just what happened. And then with Mac Jones, we all know the story. We were all here for the story. It was just a few years ago. Yep. This guy's an incapable backup quarterback. Right. He cannot do that job. Right. He took a team to the playoffs as a rookie because he was working with Josh McDaniels. And the reason all these guys have success is because Josh McDaniels is able to adapt his offense to what the quarterback does well. If he knows the quarterback's able to take a large chunk of the responsibility, he's able to do it. He did it with Brady. He did it with Garoppolo in the few games that he played in 16. And then with the other guys who he knew they weren't quite ready, he molded the offense around what their strengths were. Cam Newton was running up the gut on read options with a fullback in front of him. Yeah. Matt Castle was running around like a crazy man, and he had two reads initially on every play. Wes Welker, Randy Moss. Of course, that's how you're going to run your offense with those guys. Right. Mac Jones. They ran tempo, and Mac Jones had the ability to change aspects of certain plays, move things around, get his teammates in a position to succeed. All of those are different aspects of an offense. He molded his offense to fit what the quarterback does well. Why would he not be able to do that in New England when there's a big guy in front of him saying, listen, I'm the guy. Mm-hmm. This is our quarterback. Mm-hmm. Here's what I want you to do. You can be creative. You can go out and, like we've heard, work with colleges, learn all these different things, develop your system and make it kind of more modern. Right. You can do all of that, but at the end of the day, this is our young quarterback. You need to protect him. You need to put him in a position to succeed. And the stuff after that will come. The development will come while he's having success early.
I think that's
there's no reason why that can't happen.
I think it's well said. I mean, look, like a Nickelodeon show, Drake and Josh, I think it's going to work. I just think, if anything,
good tweet.
I'm ecstatic if I'm Drake Maye, because I think now I can become the complete quarterback.
Yeah.
Some of the things you were saying, not to say gimmick. I think that's too harsh.
I ranted. I'm sorry.
But it's just, it is very. We heard draft night. It was like that was some of the critiques. It's like, hey, this kid can he even play under center? Right. Is the footwork there? Are the fundamentals there? So in the development of Drake Maye and the evolution of Drake Maye, Josh McDaniels is someone who can sort of refine him. Maybe that's a word, refine Drake's game. So if I'm Drake Maye, I'm excited to work with Josh McDaniels. And obviously, because of the kid's gifts, his talent, his traits, Josh McDaniels must be excited to work with him too. I'm with you, Keegs. I think it's going to work between those two.
He showed, Drake, we're talking about, showed all the things that people were worried about. Where
that's right.
Working under center, he did that. Footwork, it was phenomenal. Never had to worry about it. Athleticism, he showed that. Working within a system, I don't know if he was able to do that so much because the system stunk. So he had to run around and make plays and do all these crazy things like we saw in Tennessee. But you've got a guy who very clearly has the skills to be a great quarterback, and you've got a guy who has turned mediocre at best quarterbacks into playoff guys, and he helped the greatest quarterback of all time reach the pinnacle time after time after time.
Yeah.
Why am I going to focus on the fact that a couple guys in Las Vegas didn't like him and were smoking cigars after he got fired?
Yes.
I think that's a silly way to look at it. 9 out of 10 times this thing's going to be successful if everybody's able to understand, here's my role. Yeah. I'm going to do my role. I'll trust everybody else to do theirs. If they're able to do that, no doubt in my mind this offense is going to be this much better next season.
I agree. By the way, the other thing we agree on is just building the damn foundation of the house first.
Right.
I mean, we have all day, Keegs, to pick out the shutters. And what are we going to do with landscape? Do we want a pool? Do we want a jacuzzi? Yes. But first, the foundation must be tight. And as you've laid it out, offensive line, you got to get the kids some weapons. I would love a more consistent running game. So we'll break all that stuff down here on Foxborough Rush over time. But we agree on, let's just get the foundation of the house right, and then Drake and Josh can do their thing from there. Now, one thing I know about you, Keegs, back in school, I'm sure you loved field trips. I can just tell. Because me and you, troublemakers, we probably got in trouble on field trips. Yeah. So we'll take a field trip out to Vegas for more insight on Josh McDaniels. But first, if you're enjoying the show, be sure to check out Foxborough Rush every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Feel good Football Fridays, baby, for all things Patriots football. Mike Vrabel's hired. Patriots are picking 4th overall. The offseason is going to be in fuego. Foxborough Rush is available on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, Twitch, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Let's go to Vegas. All right, here he is, our boy, Vegas Vinny Bonsignore, who covers the Raiders for the Las Vegas Journal-Review. Now, Vinny, I know it's always crazy for the Raiders in the offseason, but Patriots fans, we're just getting used to having crazy off seasons around here. So I want to just dive right in with your old friend Josh McDaniels, who you know very well in those parts, offensive coordinator now for the Patriots. Of course, we know famously the head coach for the Raiders, that didn't work out too hot, so we'll get into all that later. But what were your initial reactions when you saw McDaniels hired as the offensive coordinator coming back here to New England?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I'm really happy for Josh. I enjoyed working with Josh, covering Josh McDaniels during his time with the Raiders. I know it obviously didn't work out, on the field. There's a whole bunch of reasons why that was the case. Some of it might have been on Josh McDaniels. There were a lot of other issues that were going on during his time here. So I was happy that he landed in a familiar place, and I think it's the right move for the Patriots. If I'm Drake Maye, I'm pretty darn happy right now and feeling pretty confident that I'm in some pretty darn good hands in Josh McDaniels to get Drake Maye, the young quarterback that the Patriots have, to the next level and to reach whatever ceiling he has.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you went there, because that was my next question is, how do you think of the marriage between these two will work? Because I said on this show many times, If I'm Drake Maye, I'm excited to have Josh McDaniels, not only with that offensive mind, Vinny, but the experience that he's gained both as a coordinator and a head coach. He's had great relationships and great results with several quarterbacks in this league. How do you think that marriage will work between Drake and Josh?
Yeah, I think a lot of that's going to be on Drake, and by all accounts, I remember doing some deep dives on him because the Raiders, there was an opportunity, or at least they had hoped that there would have been an opportunity to trade up, whether it was for Jaden Daniels or Drake Maye. And by all accounts, it feels like he's a really smart kid, open to coaching. And I think those are two qualities that would serve him well under Josh McDaniels. There's going to be a lot that gets thrown at him. It's a complicated offense. There's no question about it. But it's not a impossible to learn offense. And I think Drake Maye, it feels like anyway, from the profile, that he's got it upstairs in terms of absorbing it. And if he's open to that coaching, as he should be, and I would expect him to be, then again, whatever ceiling he has, I think Josh McDaniels is the right kind of a coach to get him there.
All the scuttlebutt around town is, how are Josh McDaniels and Mike Vrabel going to coexist? And, people say, well, McDaniels is an alpha, Vrabel's an alpha. There's a potential there to butt heads. I don't necessarily see that. You've covered McDaniels for a long time. Do you sort of see those two coexisting? I mean, my take, Vinny, I just think McDaniel sort of knows his role here. You're an offensive coordinator at the end of the day, right?
Right. And look, that's what he's been for the majority of his career. And when he was doing that under Bill Belichick, I'm sure, whether there were clashes or differing of ideas, that's bound to happen as long as there's mutual respect for who has what role. Then it can thrive and survive and be fine. And I would not expect Josh McDaniels at this stage of his career and understanding what his role is going to try to usurp anything or be more than he isn't. And I'll also say this: I don't know this to be the case for Josh, but if he has any aspirations any longer of being a head coach, the one thing that can help get him there is to be a success here with the New England Patriots. And I say this because there's no longer, Tom Brady's not there, so you can't just say, well, it was all Tom Brady, and even though we all know it was a combination of Tom Brady and the coaching and the infrastructure that was around Tom, including Josh McDaniels. But he's not going to have Tom Brady anymore. And if he can turn Drake Maye into a great young quarterback and the Patriots can have success as well, there's going to be teams in the NFL or elsewhere, maybe college, that look at that and say, you know what, he's somebody worthwhile to reach out to for our head coaching opportunity 2 years, 3 years down the road. So he understands that if he wants to be a head coach, this needs to work. And so he's going to do what he has to do to make that work. And one way to make sure that it doesn't offer any guarantees, but one way to make sure that it doesn't come tumbling down is by trying to be more than he is, and that's the offensive coordinator of the Patriots.
I couldn't agree more. I've got pushback on that, Vinny. People say, oh, there's no shot. How many times do we have to see this guy as a head coach? It doesn't work. But my thing is this: Drake Maye's young. Josh McDaniels, as of now, as you and I speak now, he's not going to get any head coaching opportunities anytime soon. So let's just say, I don't know, for the sake of the convo, 3, 4, 5 years, you're working with Drake Maye. To your point, you turn that into a successful project. I don't see how an NFL job, college is always available, but the NFL, I would think 4 or 5 years down the road, if you have success with Drake Maye, I think he will end up a head coach somewhere in this league. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think people will also take a look at the situation that he was in, and if you want to talk about that for a quick second, you go back to 2021. Where everything happened with John Gruden, and then it kind of fell off. Everything sort of fell off the tracks there for about 3 or 4 games, and then late in the 2021 season under Rich Bisaccia, they got hot, and it wasn't so much that they got hot. They played some favorable matchups. There were some bad quarterbacks on the other teams that they were playing. They won 4 straight games and kind of miraculously punched their ticket to the playoffs. Right? That's 2021. That was the situation that Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler inherited. It was a team that made the playoffs, But in retrospect, and even at the time, at least I kind of felt, it wasn't a playoff team, a classic playoff team. They sort of got lucky down the stretch. But when you take over as a head coach of a team that's coming off of the playoffs, it's hard to sell anybody on the fact there's a lot of work that needs to be done here, and there's probably a big rebuild that needs to happen here. So rather than operate as a team that needed a lot of work and probably a rebuild, what they did was they tried to build off of the momentum that was created in 2021, sort of the false hope that was created in 2021. And what do? They go trade a first and a second round pick for Davante Adams. In retrospect, that's not a move that they should have made. They weren't there yet to do that. Or they weren't really on the cusp to make a bold move like that. Then they go and sign Chandler Jones to a big contract. Again, a veteran player who they put big money into and never really got the return on that money. That was a move that a team that feels like it's on the cusp feels like it has to do or should do. And they just weren't there yet. And on top of all of that, you had Derek Carr as the quarterback, and I think the world of Derek Carr on a lot of different levels, but he's not a championship caliber quarterback. And I think Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler figured that out pretty quickly, and they figured out, like, this roster's not where we thought this roster was based on what they did last year. And there was a little bit of an awakening that occurred. And I say all of that to say there were a lot of issues here with the Raiders, and I think a lot of people understood that. And I think when people, if the Patriots now can have success, if Josh McDaniels can be somebody that takes Drake Maye to a next level and takes his offense to another level, people will look back and look at the situation that he was in with the Raiders and pin it more on the situation than him on why things didn't work out here. At least that's what I would expect to happen.
Jeez Louise, Vegas Vinny, what a mess. Just such dysfunction within that organization. It almost sounds, you breaking this down, it almost sounds like McDaniels needed more time as a head coach there and less knee-jerk off-season moves. Is that fair?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily it was dysfunction, because it is when you think about a coach who takes over on a new team, what's typically the case in that situation?
I'll
ask you.
They're bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And when you're bad, you go in knowing that the situation is bad and this needs a rebuild. They were inheriting a team that went to the playoffs the year before and were, basically on the goal line of tying the Cincinnati Bengals, who, by the way, went to the Super Bowl that year. It just looked a lot better than what it really was. And it's hard to sell anybody when you come into a situation like that on, hey, this is actually a rebuild rather than trying to build onto this team that went to the playoffs. And I don't think that it was nefarious on anybody's part. And I don't think it was dysfunction on anybody's part. I think there was a lot of hope that turned out to be some false hope. So there really wasn't anything else you could do, really, if we're really being honest, than try to build off the momentum that was created in 2021. So you make some bold moves in that situation, thinking, okay, you're that close to beating the Cincinnati Bengals. If you add Davante Adams, which, by the way, that fell into their lap. That wasn't when they took over, Ziegler and McDaniels. It wasn't like they were going, now we got to go get Davante Adams. Mm-hmm. Davante Adams basically came to them. He didn't want to be in Green Bay anymore. They couldn't agree on a contract. He just didn't want to be there anymore. And the team that he did want to play for was the Raiders. So it wasn't like, hey, let's go pursue Davante Adams. It was Davante Adams pursuing the Raiders.
Right.
And that's another situation where you're like, how do you say no to Davante Adams wants to play here. He wants to play for his hometown team, the Raiders. He grew up in Northern California. He wants to play with Derek Carr, his best friend, teammates at Fresno. That's a hard thing to say no to. So it wasn't dysfunction, but maybe some miscalculation on the entire organization's part. And then by the time it played out the way it did, and I'll say this, I've really never seen a coach who walked into a situation where there was just resentment toward him and a rejecting of him from the Raider Nation, and that goes back a long way. It goes back to what happened with Tom Brady and the Tuck rule, and there was a lot of hurt feelings. And fans are going to be fans, but the Patriots were I hate to use the word hated organization from the Raiders' perspective, but it was pretty much that. And so he never, ever, there was never any honeymoon here whatsoever for the Raiders. The only thing that was really going to turn it around for Josh here with the Raiders was to have instantaneous and prolonged success. Well, the opposite happened, and that just fueled the fire. And by the time it got to midway through the second season, the Raiders owner, Mark Davis, hearing from his fans and everybody else that never liked the hire to begin with, it was echoing off the walls, and it was really at a point where this is the only thing that could happen at this point. So there was a lot of things that were working against Josh McDaniels, and he made some errors too. I'm sure he would be the first to admit that. But I think as history plays out, and especially if history looks really good for the Patriots over these next few years, they're going to look back on that situation a little bit more on his side rather than the Raiders side.
I have to ask you about that head coaching vacancy because I'm all over Deion Primetime Sanders coaching the Raiders. I saw you wrote an article about that. Let me throw you my theory here. Now,
okay.
Tom Brady has a great relationship with Prime's son, Shedeur, who we know is a quarterback coming up in the draft. You need a coach. Prime loves the big stage, loves the spotlight. Outside of Dallas, which it appears as though he turned down, what bigger stage and brighter lights for him than Vegas, baby? My theory is Brady's working the room here. I think Brady gets Prime as a coach, trades up to draft Shedeur. Maybe it's one, whereas. What do you think of my theory? Do you think I'm nuts, or do you think there's something to this?
Well, I will say this: Deion Sanders was, and I would presume still is, very interested in the job here with the Las Vegas Raiders. I don't know that that's necessarily reciprocated, but then they cast their sights on Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. We all saw what happened with that. He's now with the Chicago Bears. So maybe there is some regrouping and maybe some revisiting of that to see if that can work. And as somebody in the NFL told me earlier this week, look, if you want access to Shedeur, maybe that is the call that you make. But I don't know that John Switek, the new general manager, or the organization, I don't know how they view Shedeur in terms of the NFL. And we could sit here and think that Tom Brady would be on board, but I don't know that to be the case. It could be, but I just don't know that is the case. And if he is, then that is a call that he should make. I haven't gotten any inclination that's something that they would do, but it would certainly stir things up right now. And I'm with you. I think Deion Sanders, I think what he did at Colorado, as somebody that grew up on the West Coast and understood how morbid that college program was, and how it was just basically dead. I mean, they had one winning season in the 17 seasons before he got there, and in year two they're 9-4. That was some pretty good work done by Deion Sanders. So I think he is a good coach and a good leader, and I think he'll have his time in the NFL, whether it's here with the Raiders. I'm not so sure about that.
Hey, you bring up a great point, because not only wins and losses for what he did in Boulder, but literally what he did in Boulder in terms of attention and sort of, making it relevant and making it cool to be in Colorado. Look, I mean, that team, the Raiders, won 4 games last season, Vin. They were boring. Yeah. There was nothing there. If you were telling me I can get Prime and his son, even if you won 4 games again, okay, in year one of that experience, it's still, think of all the attention that the Raiders would get. That's got to count for something, right? Isn't that fair?
Yeah, I think what they're looking for now is good attention. I think, I don't know how that would work. I do like Shedeur Sanders. I think he's the best quarterback in this draft, and I think if you're the Raiders and you do like Shedeur Sanders, you got to do whatever it takes to go get him, whether that's trading up, going to get his dad. I don't know, but it would be interesting to see. And like I said, their number one target. Ben Johnson slipped out of their hands. He's with the Chicago Bears right now, and they've interviewed Pete Carroll, they've interviewed Ron Rivera, they've interviewed Robert Saleh, Steve Spagnuolo, the Chiefs defensive coordinator, Vance Joseph, the Denver Broncos defensive coordinator. All of those guys are respected coaches. I think Pete Carroll would be great for this job. But if you do want to mix it up a little bit, if you want to stir it up a little bit and bring some attention and maybe get access to the best quarterback, I think anyway, in this draft, that's maybe a call that you should consider making.
What do you make of Tom Brady? Not only as a minority owner there, but even as a broadcaster. Talk to me about all things Brady post-playing career. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I probably heard two of the telecasts that Tom did. One was the most recent one, again, the Detroit Lions Commanders game. And at least for me, from the one I heard earlier, because usually I'm in a press box on Sundays, I don't get a chance to listen to the telecast. But from the broadcast that I had heard earlier in the season, I think it might have been the Raiders bye week or somewhere along the line, compared to the Tom Brady that I heard Saturday against the Detroit Lions and Commanders, I thought he made a lot of progress. And I could go on and on with this, but we live in a society that just likes to hate, and so that's what you deal with on a daily basis. I know I have to deal with that sometimes, and we all do. And if you're a high-profile person like Tom Brady, who people either love and sometimes maybe hate based on what he did as a football player and whose team you were rooting for and whose team was getting beat by him, you probably don't like Tom Brady, and that's great. That's all fine. But I also feel like there's a lot of overly critical people, and to have expected Tom Brady to get it right off the bat and beat John Madden right off the bat, it's just not going to work. I mean, you need time, you need reps, and you need to grow and hone your skills. And so for me, the progress that I did see from earlier in the season to Saturday, I thought was a positive for him. So I'm not one of those ones that just hates to be hating. I don't operate that way. I don't like people that do that. Everyone has their opinion, but I thought I saw some growth this year from him as a broadcaster.
Listen, I'm not a hater either. I'm a lover, okay, Vin? But at the same time, Mark Davis has a dumbass haircut. So my question to you is, other than that haircut, how does he compare to his late, great father, Al? Are they similar? Are they completely different? Because from the outside looking in, I can't get past that haircut. I can't. But what's he like as an owner?
I think Mark Davis's heart is in the right place. He wants to win, and I've gotten to know Mark pretty well over the years, and I don't doubt that for a second. In fact, I'll share a story with you. It was probably 2014, 2015, when the Raiders were still in Oakland, and things were falling apart in terms of the stadium deal in Oakland, so they had to start looking elsewhere, and Los Angeles became a place that they looked. And I remember visiting with him. We were at the 50-yard line at the Dallas Cowboys training camp site in Oxnard, California, after practice, and we're talking. And I said to Mark, I go, if you do move to Los Angeles, were in terms of him not having a contemporary stadium and how that put him and some other teams that didn't have contemporary stadiums behind the eight ball financially with their competitors. And new stadiums had opened up in New England and New York and almost everywhere else in the NFL. And the financial disadvantage it created for the Raiders. He's like, look, it would be one thing if the differences were $5 million or $10 million being the 32nd team in revenue compared to the first. But you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's a competitive advantage that they have compared to my team. So that's why I need a new stadium. And I told him, I go, well, if you move to Los Angeles, your team, the worth of your team is going to go through the roof. You're probably going to double, triple the worth of your team. And he looked at me and he said, Vinny, I'm going to say this, and you'll probably think I'm lying or I'm crazy or whatever. He goes, but I don't care about any of that. He goes, I just want to be able to be on a competitive field with my 31 other teams in this league from a financial standpoint in terms of competing for players, competing for coaches, facilities, all that. I just want to win championships. It doesn't matter to me how much the team is worth. It's all paper. It's meaningless to me. How much can this help me win championships? And from that day on, I've never really questioned his desire to win. Is he like his dad? No. His dad was a pioneer in terms of personnel, coaching, eye for talent, all of that. He was a football genius, one of the great football geniuses of all time. And so he's not Al Davis. But I give him credit for knowing what he doesn't know. And one of those things is I'm not a football guy.
Yeah.
So I try to hire people that can make good decisions. And that's what I'll do. That's how I'll do it. But in terms of their burning desire to win, he's very much like his dad.
Yeah. Hey, what is it? Just win, baby. I mean, that's what it is. I think that says it all. We appreciate you, man. We hope to have you back on many times here on Foxborough Rush. In fact, if you're enjoying the show, be sure to check out today's episode of Nesson's Daily Sports Podcast. Boston has entered the chat. We cover all things Boston sports as well as trending sports topics from around the country, including Vegas. Available on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, Twitch, and wherever else you get your podcast. All right, now we covered Josh McDaniels every way possible. Keegan, now let's get into the defensive coordinator, Terrell Williams, who we know comes over from the Lions, but has a rich history of working with Mike Vrabel. I loved this hire, Keegs, and I have to imagine you did too. And look, this is a Vrabel disciple.
Yeah.
This is a guy that's going to preach his gospel. And I've been saying this to George, where I like Mike Vrabel, the CEO. I want him to oversee everything. I know he's not an offensive guy, he's defensive-minded head coach and all that stuff. But Vrabel's the kind of dude I trust overseeing everything. I don't necessarily want him leaning too much into the defense. I want his imprint on the offensive side of the ball. I want him, I imagine, Vrabel's the type that's going to say, we need an identity, because that's what this team was missing. You and I can agree. Run the ball, punch you in the mouth. We want to be physical on both sides of the ball. So I want Vrabel's imprint all over this team. This is one way to do it with this defensive coordinator hire, because he can now sort of look at everything from a bird's eye view and not be needed so much on the defensive side of the ball. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the big thing that Mike Vrabel was looking for when he was making these hires was, I need guys with experience.
Yeah.
Because the Patriots last year didn't have anybody on the coaching staff
Good
with
point.
experience.
Yep.
Like, Alex Van Pelt's been coaching for a long time. He never called plays before last year.
That's right.
And DeMarcus Covington was once viewed as a great young assistant head coach or assistant coach. Now he's trying to find a job somewhere because he had such a bad year as a defensive coordinator. Putting these guys in positions to fail, essentially, is what the Patriots did last year. So what they did this year was turn around. Mike Vrabel said, I got my boys and I know what they're about.
Yes.
I know what they're capable of. I'm going to bring them in and we're going to establish a culture here. And that's what he's doing with Terrell Williams. I love the fact that as soon as they hired Terrell Williams, the first thing you heard were like, all the players talk about is how he wants them to be violent. That's what he preaches to his players.
Yep.
If there's a word you could have your defensive coordinator preach, it's violence. Like,
Facts.
you want your defensive coordinator to want his players to kill people.
Yes.
And I think Terrell Williams is that guy. And back to the experience thing, he started his career in 1998 at Fort Scott. If you look at his full resume, getting to the fact where he's a defensive coordinator of the New England Patriots, 6-time Super Bowl champion, one of the greatest franchises in the sport, it looks like a CVS receipt. Like, he's been everywhere, and he's done everything, and he's coached all these different players who have nothing but great things to say about him. Ndamukong Suh, best year of his career under Terrell Williams. Cameron Wake, best year of his career under Terrell Williams. Aiden Hutchinson's breakout under Terrell Williams. Like, these are all-time guys here, and they love this dude.
Yeah.
What do we know about him calling plays? Not a ton, right?
Yeah.
There's a little bit of all right, you're going from one guy who never called plays to another guy that never called plays, but with Mike Vrabel there, who was a great defensive coordinator and moved into that head coaching role, there's support.
Yep.
There's somebody above him to where they can just say, hey, listen, we're not doing that right now.
That's right.
I know you want to blitz the safety right now. That's stupid. Don't do that.
Don't do it.
It's 4th and 18. Yeah. Why are you taking a guy out of the secondary?
Right.
There are people there to help support him and help him make the right decisions. But everything from what I've heard, and I'm not going to act like I know a ton about the guy other than what has come out in the last week or so.
Sure.
Everything I've heard, big fan. I love a guy who preaches violence, preaches versatility, and wants to go hit somebody in the mouth. That's what I want in my defensive coordinator, and the Patriots got one.
I think that's well said. And listen, I think that is what there is to know about the guy, quite frankly, because I know the same thing as you, and that's what's been put out there, and we can only do the research that we can. This is what all these players are saying. By the way, the players you name, defensive line, as you said, all-timers, there are talented defensive linemen in-house here. We'll see with Barmore and the history and, obviously his health. Hopefully everything's fine. I'm going to assume everything is, Keegs. I don't know. I'm just a doctor. I play one on TV. I'm not actual doctor, but I'm going to assume that the talent that's here is going to be here and you're going to add to it. We're going to talk about the draft later. There's a kid at Penn State you could be bringing in. We'll see. But you have talent. The cupboards are not bare in terms of the defensive line.
Right.
So, I mean, look, I watch these playoff games just like you. A lot of these teams, they're not dialing up blitzes every time, to your point. They're getting it done on the defensive line. That front three, front four, they're creating pressure. They're creating havoc.
Right.
And then the back end of your defense, it's much easier for them to do their job if your front is doing that. So I know we're getting that with Terrell Williams along with the violence. So I agree. And listen, I also am happy too, Keegan, on a whole different level, to see another black coach here in Foxborough after what just happened with Drake Maye.
In a position,
yes,
a bigger position. Right?
That's right.
It's not just an assistant coach.
That's right.
Absolutely. I think, and I mentioned it off the top with the process and how they hired people, where it was checking off boxes for the Rooney Rule, and it's like, guys, take it seriously. Why aren't you taking it seriously? And I've talked about it, and people on Twitter, we all know them, right? Who cares if they make the right hire? They make the right hire.
It matters.
At the end of the day, if you're not bringing in as many people as possible to show
that's right
how things are done outside of your organization, you're doing yourself a disservice. So even if you want to take out the Rooney Rule, which it's ridiculous, why would you want to take that out? That's a big part of what the NFL is trying to do, get more minority coaches in the league. But if you want to take it out, if there's some weird reason why you want to do that, understand the fact that if you're bringing more people into interview, you're getting more perspective, you're learning things about other organizations, and you're going to make changes that are going to help you moving forward.
That's right.
They didn't do that. But what they did do was bring in a bunch of guys who know each other, who are familiar with each other, and they've got a foundation set. So instead of rebuilding everything from scratch, they brought in guys who know what they're doing, who have an idea of how they want this thing done, and they're going to be able to hit the ground running. So, I guess if you're going to skirt the process, if you're going to just hire the guys you wanted to hire, at least you hired a bunch of dudes who know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's well said. By the way, an identity. Like you said, violence. Just have an identity. I was screaming, and you know this. I was ahead of it. I think I was the first person in the market to say Mayo was going to get fired because of a lack of identity. That's so important in this league. I don't care what team you are. I don't care who your coach is. You have to have some sort of identity. I like now, to your point, of bringing all these guys in who not only have cohesion and experience, but they all are in lockstep for what we're going to be, what the culture's going to be. We're going to be tougher than a $2 steak. We're going to hit you in your mouth. It's going to be violence. I love that. Because even, by the way, if it's not wins and losses, next season, let's just, for the sake of the convo, because I don't think this is going to happen, but for the sake of the convo, let's say they win 4 games again, Keegan. You will have an identity now. And then you can build. You can say, okay, we didn't win that many games, but look how many bloody noses we gave every week. We were in every game. And I think just by having this sort of mentality, this sort of culture that we're talking about, some of those close games that they lost last season, they'll win next season. Because in theory, with what you and I are saying, they should be in all these games again, except you're going to win some of them where you lost them last year.
And in terms of roster building, like, we're going to get into this thing as we approach the draft and free agency, right? But look at the teams that are left. AFC and NFC championships are this weekend.
All tough.
Philadelphia, Washington.
All tough.
Kansas City, Buffalo. What do they all have? Awesome linemen. Defense, offense, doesn't matter. They were built through the trenches. The Eagles' defensive line, maybe like top 10 unit of all time, just in terms of pure talent. Like Milton Williams, who's a rotational player at this point.
Carter.
He's going to make $70 million this offseason because somebody's going to be like, that's my defensive tackle. That's my star right there. And he's a rotational guy in Philly. This is how these teams are built. And this is how the Patriots intend on building their team. We're going to get into the draft in a minute. I don't want to steal your thunder with a great tease. Pat everywhere. Great job, Keegs. But, this is how these teams are built. And the Patriots are going to have an opportunity, I believe, to do the same thing, where they're going to build through the line, defense or offense, whatever it might be, and shore up the trenches, protect their quarterback, and then be able to get after another team. So I'm a big fan of the process in terms of how they're going to build the team.
Sure.
The coaching staff, not so much, but I believe in the process on how they're going to build a team.
Hey, that was a tease before the tease because we're about to talk the draft. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to check out Foxborough Rush every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for all things Patriots football. Mike Vrabel's hired. Patriots picking 4th overall. The offseason's cooking. Foxborough Rush is available on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, Twitch, and wherever else you get your podcast. All right, let's dive in. We've teased it 74 times. Let's talk draft now.
I can't help myself.
To be fair, we're going to have mock drafts. We're going to talk draft tour blue in the face. So this is just literally a teaser here, Keegs. I guess my question to you, because you know where I'm going, is do you want offense or defense? Because I have made no ifs, ands, or buts. I've kind of given up my Travis Hunter dreams. I've kind of given up. I just don't think at 4 he's going to be available. He may go 1 overall in this thing. Yeah. But I am still, to be clear, for the record, all in on offense. Offensive linemen, maybe it's another receiver. I don't give a damn. I watched this offense struggle so bad last season.
Yeah.
Bottom of the barrel, it felt like. And by the way, I already told you, I don't think defensively the cupboard is bare. So I'm cool with focusing on the offensive side of the ball in the draft or free agency, but we're talking draft here. I, at 4, would rather go offense. I think offensive linemen are boring, but I at least understand it if they go that route. What do you make? Do you want defensive or offensive side of the ball in terms of the number 4 pick?
I wish George were here.
I know.
To hear you say that offensive line, it might be boring.
It is.
It's a smart way to go. It has me thinking.
Oh.
I'm thinking.
I like when you do this.
Why not just address all these needs before you get to the draft?
Free agents.
And then take the best player available. This has been my thing the whole time. And little tease for you folks. After the Super Bowl, we got a little thing rolling out on Nesson, cross platforms everywhere. Yeah. Patriots Manifesto. And your boy,
I like that,
is going to fix the New England Patriots.
Oh!
I'm going to fix them.
You're giving me Windhorse energy right now. I like
fixing this thing. I can't stand to watch these guys screw it up as much as they have. So I'm going to fix it.
Okay.
And priority number 1 is address all of your needs before you get to the draft. Because in my eyes, you're going to hamstring yourself if you don't do that. If you're going to get to the draft and you really need an offensive lineman, but you're sitting at 4 and Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter are still there, and you're going to pass on one of those guys? Yeah. And you're going to be like, well, we need a left tackle.
We didn't
get a left tackle in free agency, so
God.
we need one.
I would lose it. I'd lose it.
My brain would explode. I would poof, and I'd be dust.
Me too.
I can't allow it to happen.
No.
So.
Can't.
I'm going to skirt the question, Trav. Your question, offense or defense, I don't give a crap.
Okay.
If it's Travis Hunter, if it's Abdul Carter, take whoever is available. And to give you a little something, give Ethan a social clip.
Sure.
You go Abdul Carter. He's number 1. He's number 1 in my eyes. If both of them are available, Abdul Carter, he fits the system. He fits where the NFL is going in terms of dominant defensive linemen who can play in multiple spots and affect an opposing offense. And he fits the culture. So he fits all 3 of those things. Do I think Travis Hunter is going to be a fantastic pro? Yes, I do. I think he's going to be awesome. But when you get to the NFL and the fact that we haven't seen a guy dominate on both sides of the ball yet, there's a little part of me that thinks, all right, is he just going to be quarterback 2 for you and a gadget guy on offense? Is that worth more than a franchise-altering defensive edge rusher? I don't know if it is. Right. So if I'm stacking those 2 things against each other, Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, I go Carter. But I'm also just going to fix everything before you even get to the draft and take the best player available.
Okay.
A guy like me, that's what I do. I don't know.
All right. I'm not going to flip out like everyone thinks I am because you're taking Abdul Carter over a generational talent in Travis Hunter. Shame on you.
I know.
However, I won't flip out because you said what you said at the end, which is, listen, bro, you got to fix some things before we even get to the draft. Right. So I understand what you're saying. So if you pass on a Travis Hunter, it tells me 2 things, and you go Abdul Carter, it tells me 2 things. It means you got T. Higgins, to your point.
Yep.
It means you went out and you got a bona fide number 1 wideout, or at the very least, you upgraded at that position. I'm with that, okay? But the thing about Travis Hunter is he can play corner. So technically, you could still go deep, Vance, and draft him. The only issue there, you got to have a conversation with the kid. But, to see if because he wants to play both.
Right.
So you got to get a feel for that. Maybe there's some packages you could work in with Travis Hunter. That's where I would go at 4, but I at least understand what you're saying. If you address all those needs and you are just going best player available, I'm still going Travis Hunter, but I don't think you can go wrong with Carter either. In fact, if either one of them are there, you can't go wrong.
Right.
My gut says Carter will be there and not Travis Hunter, but this is why we draft, my friend.
Yeah.
And listen, one thing's for sure. I like having you here right now because you have your GM hat on and you're the voice of reason. When you and George get together, I mean, I can't get a word in edgewise. But Keegs, we love you here. Keagan Stiefel, Travis Thomas here on Foxborough Rush. Till next time, when we do this all over again, and we will argue till the cows come home about who the Patriots should draft at number 4 or trade back or whatevs.
We got 3 more months of this.
Exactly. But for now, we'll end it on this note, Keegs, because you and I are on the same page, and we appreciate all of you for being on the same page with us here on Foxborough Rush. Till next time, peace.